and a CNN report revealing that Ukraine is likely responsible for the drone attacks on the Wagner groups, which is backing or which have been backing forces in Sudan. According to the Ukrainian military source, the attacks on Sudan's paramilitary group, Rapid Support Forces, are an extension of the ongoing Russian invasion of Ukraine. Let's get some analysis now, and someone who knows better than we do is independent researcher Thomas Lesaffre, and he joins us for this conversation. Thomas, thank you very much for your time once again coming onto this program. What do you understand is going on exactly here? Is CNN correct to suggest that Ukraine may be involved in the ongoing fight that is happening in Sudan, and on whose side might they be?
Yeah, that's the big questions here. That's definitely the big questions. What we know is that Russia is involved into Sudanese politics since at least 2014, right? So remember where Russia invaded Crimea in the south of Ukraine in 2014. A lot of international sanctions came to burst them, right? And those international sanctions increased in the last 2 years. So what we know is that Russia need gold. It's really important to understand that. The same way when Zimbabwe is under sanction, it is really easy for Zimbabwe to sell its gold, so to get some dollars back. Russia is in a similar situation. But Russia doesn't have that much gold. So Russia came to Sudan in order to first partner with the government and meld inside the gold businesses, right? But then what happened is that a civil war emerged outside of two powerful generals, General Emedeti and the RSF and the President Al-Burhan. It seems like what's happening right now is Wagner is helping Emeti, the rebel of the north, let's call him like this, to simplify for audience. Wagner is backing them up because the gold is in the north. So Wagner export gold. Wagner is a paramilitary working for Russia. So when we think Wagner, we think Russia. They're exporting gold from the north of Sudan, which is controlled now by General Emeti. So they are partnering with him. And so in exchange, or in parallel, General Al-Burhan, most probably, we do not have evidence, but most probably gave information, gave knowledge, gave intelligence to the Ukrainians and invited them to strike directly Wagner forces that are in alliances with the people that fight him. So here we have some politicians with some agencies that try to probably invite some forces to fight his enemies. But the game is really complicated and dangerous because there's a lot of gold in Sudan. Sudan is the third African exporters of gold in Africa.
So that's a very interesting element that you're bringing into this conversation, because in essence what you are saying is that Wagner's involvement in Sudan, yes, on the one hand, they seem to have an alliance with the Rapid Support Forces, that's the so-called rebel group within the Sudanese army that broke away, and those are the now two groups that are fighting. So correct. Their involvement is in two parts: to help the FSF, but at the same time, it is to extract gold, Sudanese gold. Is that gold being taken to Russia legally, or is it being smuggled out of Sudan?
So it is smuggled out of Sudan with the help of a key figure in the rebellion right now. But before, they were key figure of the government, right? So what we know is that it is legal because it passed by a lot of companies, right, that are officials, but at the end of the day, they do not pay as much tax as they should be paying. So what is possible is that they export, some tax are paid, but the majority is exported without a control of the state, right? So now we know that in exchange of the gold, they provide weapons to different people in the region. We're thinking of General Haftar in Libya that also have been seen with Wagner, and General Emeti in Sudan. So all of those forces receive support from Russia in exchange of exporting the gold. So you have a system of weapons versus gold that is really common on the continent, also happening in Eastern Congo, where we do know that a lot of people go and buy gold from artisanal miners, export it, and then use corruptions to make sure that it is not seen as a bloody conflict gold. So what we have here is Russia under sanctions. Really important to see that. The sanctions that NATO and Western Europe have imposed on Russia, Russia is trying to control them, to cut them by going to Sudan, using the gold of Sudan in order to buy a whole range of things, right? With gold you can buy a lot of things. They don't need to have dollars or yuan or rubles. If you have gold, you do a lot.
It will be easy for Russia to dismiss this and say this is part of the Western propaganda. Is there any proof? I know that we're now swaying the conversation because initially we were talking about Ukrainian involvement, but we're going to get there ultimately. It's going to be easy for Russia to dismiss this as some propaganda. What evidence is there that indeed Russia is smuggling Sudanese gold in order to meet its own financial situation right now?
So what we have as evidence is some researchers were able to trace the plane from a Syrian base. So we know Russia have a base in Syria, and able to trace the movement of this plane to north of Sudan, where the gold is bought and when we assume weapons are being dropped, right? So we had some satellite image and some tracing of that plane that go back and forth from Syria to the border between Libya and Sudan, and then Sudan, right? So CNN came with some solid evidence. However, we know it is part of the agenda that is a NATO agenda and an American agenda. It is for sure that they release those information because of that. When it comes to the Ukrainian drone attack, right, we should not be naive. Why do we know the Ukrainians have made it or are likely to make it? Not only because CNN told us, but also because the analysis of the technique, right? If I ask you, where else have you seen drone? I don't know if you saw the image, but you literally see one drone attacking a pickup and exploding the pickup, and then there's a second drone to take all those images, right? And those images were dropped on social media last week. So what we know for sure is that this is a technique that are used by Ukrainians in the conflict that they have in Russia, in their own territory, in Ukraine. What is new here is that they use that technique, they import that new military techniques on the African continent. And as far as I understand, this have never been done before, and this is really powerful because you have the image of a really small drone, and you have the capacity to eat in a lot of places. You really just need like good internet connections, and which is easy to find when you have military operations. So definitely we have the technique tells us that it was Ukraine, it was likely to be Ukraine behind it, and it served the interest of the current president of Sudan, General al-Burhan. So that's how CNN conclude that the Ukrainians are likely to be behind it. But yes, it is an agenda from the NATO, but from the African continent, we need to look at it and ask ourselves, what does it mean for sovereignty? What does it mean that foreign forces just can come here and fight? Is General al-Burhan agency growing? So General al-Burhan has more and more power in Sudan. Is it what we're observing? Or is it what we're observing the reverse? A weakening of the institution of Sudan state that allows a lot of foreign actors to come and penetrate African politics. The big question for me is that.
Yeah, and you're absolutely spot on. In the coming days, do you think that Ukraine will likely admit that they have been involved in the attacks in Sudan, and might they make their position clear as to why they've decided to get involved?
Listen, you have two types of clarity we can expect from the Ukrainians here, right? I think it is really clear. They already have released the video, right? So they have drawn videos, they attack, and they release the video on social media. So this is a direct signing. You don't have to say, it was me. Right? For everyone in the military community or in people that follows those type of things to know it was them. So the fact that the Secret Service have spoke about it already tells us that they are partly responsible. But even when they send drones to Moscow, I don't know if you follow up, but they have sent some similar drones to Moscow in order to introduce fear in the Russian population.
Yes.
Even when they do that, they don't claim they did it. They say they're likely behind it. So we won't have a clear yes, it was us until the war is finished. But because of the technique that they use and because of the agenda that they serve, we are highly thinking of Ukraine involvement here in Africa. The first time, maybe it might be the first time since the end of Second World War that two European powers fight on the African continent to sort out their issues, and that's an interesting fact.
It's unprecedented. It's unprecedented. I think that's the word we ought to use. Well, let's conclude the conversation on that political note, where we are talking now sovereignty. And you've put it so well that what questions should we be asking of African leaders when two foreign powers or European powers are able to come onto the continent and fight their issues on African soil? What is it that this continent can do or say about a situation like this? Because there are those on the continent who have flatly refused to condemn Russia for what they are doing, i.e. South Africa. We have adopted a non-aligned stance here.
Listen, I really great question. Thank you for affirming the opportunity. I will answer by one other question. Does Russia steal Botswana diamond? Does Russia steal South African diamond that are in the hand of the Beers or African Rainbow, all of those companies? No. Why? Because there is solid institution in both Botswana and Southern Africa in general, right? I'm thinking of Botswana for our audience to understand. But yet they are able to come and to organize the smuggling of gold outside of Sudan. So what does it mean? What it means is, and here I'm repeating the argument of civil society in Sudan, is that in order to make sure that those foreign actors don't have so much capacity to melt down in African politics and sovereignty of those states, we need institutions. We need institutions that are solid, that publish a lot of reports, that are transparent. We do know how much diamond get outside of Botswana. We do know how much diamond get outside of South Africa. And this is really important because it can help us to trace who are the actors involved, right? So the solution that I can speak of might not be the most sexy one. I'm not calling for better leadership. What I'm calling for is better institution to handle those leadership. And I think that's a key element that can be deployed in Sudan and in other conflicts. We're thinking of Congo here, where also institutions are really weak, and it led a lot of foreign actors being able to just come in and buy gold in exchange of weapons. It's really simple to do because the institutions are not well functional, and that's what we need to build, institutional capacity.
Thomas Lesaffre, let me thank you very much for your time and analysis, an independent researcher who has been watching the wars, not just on the continent, but that Russia-Ukraine conflict. It's now playing out on African soil. Absolutely stunned.